Iranian Revolution happened around 1978-79, and it was a time that there was no sense of security. There was no sense of knowing what even tomorrow will bring. I remember, even though Iran is an oil-rich nation, we were so cold because we could not obtain kerosene. Even in the most peaceful countries, when you're 12, you're going through so much changes. So there is an upheaval inside you. But at that time, Iran as a nation and our family as a family that belonged to a religious minority in a country that was going through change, underwent the most tumultuous upheaval and changes. When I talk about the changes that were happening in Iran and the changes that was happening just in my own self, it was also very amazing time because you felt part of a history. You felt that this is a turning point in the history of the nation. So I was quite excited to be in Iran. There were, of course, fears, but there were more excitement about that I could be part of something meaningful. So at that time, even though my parents were Baha'is, I did not want to follow the religion of my parents. And as Baha'is, we don't inherit the religion of our ancestors or our parents. And my own grandparents became Baha'is themselves. So I knew that I have the right and duty to investigate the truth for myself. So the voices that were attractive to me were the voices of change by standing up for what you believe, and also not necessarily violent opposition, but expressing your opposition to what was happening. So in our school, there were many of my classmates that wanted to go on rallies, to go on protesting, and I wanted to join that. My mom was worried for my safety and sometimes would ask me not to go to school or not to go to these rallies. And I was studying about Marx and trying to figure out what is the best system for the world that brings the maximum justice to humanity. But I was not interested in investigating Baha'i faith. One time, my mom wanted to go to the funeral of 2 or 3 Baha'is who had been executed. She couldn't leave me alone at home. She thought I would run out and go to these other rallies. So basically, she took me to the funeral. And I was a bit puzzled. Why would anyone want to go against Baha'is? They're just such passive people. They don't do anything other than prayers. This was my thoughts, way of thinking at that age. And then when I saw just the people that had gone to this funeral, even though it was a dangerous time for anyone to attend the funeral of someone that has been executed by government, there were many people, including clergy, Muslim clergy, from the villages of the people that had been executed and people of different religious backgrounds. They were in this funeral crying. And then I found out that these people that had been killed, tortured and killed, were so loved by the people that knew them, that they had taken the risk of attending the funeral, and how much they had contributed to the benefit of their neighbors and their villages. So I thought, maybe these people believed in something that I didn't understand, and maybe I should investigate, but I didn't want my parents to know I was doing that because I didn't want them to think I'm following what they believe. So in secret, I investigated Baha'i faith for myself. And then I realized it's not a passive religion. If anything, it requires the believers to develop a sense of responsibility to the time they live in, to know that they need to be anxiously concerned with the need of the time they're born into. So this concept of being anxiously concerned with the problems of the society you're born into and the time you're born into, and try to understand the principles of the root of the problems. And within the sphere that you can to try to align yourself, your actions, your thoughts in the process of bringing civilization to a better point, which for me as a Iranian youth at that time meant certain actions. And of course, in Australia, it might mean different actions. But none of these actions are passive. None of the roles that Baha'is took in Iran was the role of a victimhood. Even though they were victimized, they didn't accept that role of being a victim. So that sort of empowered me. And around the age of 16, I declared that I am a Baha'i. I was a good student in Iran, probably one of the top students in my class, but by the fact that I decided I say I'm a Baha'i, I was not allowed to go to university. So when I finished year 12, I decided I want to still contribute to my country. I will stay in Iran. I will not leave. I will take up a trade. So I enrolled in hairdressing course. I wasn't a very good student, but I learned how to do hairdressing. And I was quite resigned to the fact that I will not go to university. Mona was Baha'i youth who was 6 months older than me. She was arrested for merely hosting and teaching children on Friday afternoons some spiritual education and moral education. Her arrest by itself was very amazing for me, and I'm thinking, why would anybody arrest her? She doesn't have any power. So I felt a sense of, wow, she must be somebody quite unique that they have done this. They usually wouldn't arrest people just because you have children classes. That's what I thought. So I was following her story. I was always thinking, oh, what is Mona doing now? And then I heard her father had been executed, which was very sad for me. And I was hoping that they would release Mona so Mona could attend the funeral. And I never forget that day that my dad came home and he was crying. And he said, 10 women have been executed in Shiraz. 7 of them are very young women. And then when I looked at the list, I realized Mona is one of them. And as you can appreciate in those times, news didn't travel as easily as they do now. We didn't know the story because no Baha'i was present at the time these 10 people were killed. Many years later, the driver of the bus that took these 10 women from their cells to the place that they were going to be hung, he was so moved. He came and contacted the Baha'is and told the story. And in that story is how Mona only died because she wanted to improve the lives of children. And you see the bus driver driving these women. They're covered in this black chador, which is the veil women were forced to wear. And as they are going, and he told the relatives of these 10 women that Mona was the youngest, she was 17, and she asked the executioner for one wish, that she wants to die last because she wants to pray for each of these 9 women that they pass their test, because till the last moment you have a chance of saying, I'm not a Baha'i. So she is radiant, happy, not scared, and how Mona kissed the noose and put it around her head and died. So this story that later on we heard, I mean, just imagine, I am at this stage, I'm 17, 18 when I hear this story. I am so moved. It's almost like a Hollywood movie. How can a human being rise above their absolute situation of hopelessness? So whenever I am down or whenever I feel a sense of hopelessness, I remember, because to be honest with you, whenever I studied or read the Baha'i history of the early Baha'is 100 years ago, I always thought it's too good to be true. But now that I've experienced those few years that I lived after revolution among such amazing souls, I now believe if this is true now, it must have been true then. So it gives me hope that it is not a Hollywood movie, it is actually true reality. And it just shows the immense power of a human soul that not only gives energy to Mona, but gives energy to me 40 years later. So yes, Mona's story affected me and has continued to affect me. And then things became worse for our family. And one night, the soldiers came to our house and arrested both my parents. We became homeless. My mom was in prison for a short time, only 3 weeks, but my dad was given a 12-year sentence. At that time, we weren't even sure he would be given 12-year sentence or he would be executed. This was later on, his sentence was reduced 12-year first, and then after 4 years he got released. But at that moment, we thought he would die. So when my mom came out of prison, she decided for our safety and the situation that we were homeless, that the 3 oldest children's lives were safer if we escaped. So we escaped to Pakistan, and then we became a refugee. After obtaining visa for Australia, we migrated to Australia. I'm now an Australian citizen. I became a doctor. I want my vocation in life to be something meaningful and something that contributes to another human being's improvement in this world. Through all these experiences, I have completely felt the oneness of mankind and that we are one people. We have divided ourselves against the absolute truth of our oneness. But the time has come that one by one we have to remove the barriers. But I also have seen the great human suffering that these divisions and years and decades of injustice has caused humanity. I'm quite mindful of the magnitude of the change that needs to happen. But I believe it is within human power to make this change. The same way that we were once tribes and families, then we became villages and cities and then nations. Human beings are capable of making this planet one inhabitants that all of us can flourish.
Mona with the children, send your love to me. All around the world we'll be dancing. Mona with the children, send your love to me. Every precious moment you'll be dancing, and every precious moment you'll be free.